Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. My name is David Tran, and I'm the co-founder of Xfusion.io and the co-host of this show. Today, I'm joined by Ilias Beshimov, and he's the co-founder and head of product at Celential.ai, a Series A startup in Silicon Valley, offering AI-powered recruitment services. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me, David.
So I recognize you've been in the startup space for a while. What makes you so passionate about tackling the current challenges you're currently tackling?
Thank you. Actually, I think being in startup space is what made me especially excited about working on Celential. And that my kind of first for entrepreneurship was actually founding a company out of college, and it was in the healthcare space because I was studying economics. And if you remember, when Obama got elected, he was throwing a lot of money into healthcare space for adoption of electronic medical records. And to me, it felt like, exciting, because there's now so much data that we can analyze and build regressions. Because, when somebody is studying economics and you say you're going to give more data, it's like crack. Like, yes, this is it, more data to transfer. I was very excited and started trying to learn about space, when the data is going to become available, what's interesting. I remember actually reading a law that, what kind of electronic medical system must be to be able to qualify for the stimulus money. And what I realized was the language about interoperability was extremely weak. There were no standards, no definitions, no requirements, no cases. So my hypothesis was, which unfortunately, 12 years hence, is unfortunately came true, that most records went from, on doctor's office on the wall in a hard binder to now silent databases. That's, they're traveling. And it's still hard to get your access. It's not. So my idea was like, well, what if I build something that can help to become interoperable and standardized, so that I can release an API to build smart application about it? Because around the time, I remember, also it fascinated me how I remember using WebMD one day, and one of the ways to profile yourself, there's like a outline of a man and click where it hurts. Which is like, well, if that wasn't actually any good information, it's hard. And I remember I also had allergies, and I tried to look up something, but then I'm supposed to type some things that I can't spell. Right? And that was my record. I remember having a hard time trying to access it to figure out, so I can Google it to figure out how to help with those hay fevers. I can build it. I was looking to build a company, is something that worthwhile to solve. Let's try to do it. And since then, the startup, we prayed for a few years, raised some money, didn't work out, and I went to work in different companies, mostly startups. And each experience, what happened over and over again is, even though I loved what I was working on, the job, the company was never what I thought it was going to be when I was interviewing. And it never really came out of malice on the company trying to sell me to Jordan. No, not at all. Just because it's hard. It's hard to define, hard to represent. It's what it's going to be. And especially when you're outside, when you interview, which is, again, hard to really define yourself, what to give anybody a taste of what's going to be like. You have very little information, especially startups, of knowing where you're getting into, except maybe a few people have LinkedIn profiles that you look up and say, well, maybe I have connection. I can ask how to work with those people. But really, that's it. At the same time, for a few years, after working at Zynga and Scopely, I spent a few years doing consulting, helping startup build their product teams, remove their products, and a lot of them wanted me to join full time, which is again, having worked with them, I love them. The thing was exciting. It's not something I want to do having experienced it. It's not that there's anything magical. That's not what I'm looking for. And around this time, I realized I read an article that just showed that, hey, we work so much in America and the rest of the world, right? The culture of workaholics. It's especially also a lot of hours, working from banking to startups. Also in startups, we know it's a very high touch environment, of how you have to operate, the breadth of responsibilities to take on. And at the same time, a separate study showed that the majority of people, if they changed, if they went to a big job, a big company, go work for Google, work for Facebook, you earn more money than if you work on startups, right? Because most startups are not going to fail and your equity is not going to amount to anything. So on one hand, we are working a lot in a very difficult environment, and we're going to earn less at the same time, and we know nothing about what we're getting ourselves into. There's not even a help, right? There's still, if you're looking for a job, the best experience you have is go in, Indeed or LinkedIn and keyword title match. That's how you search for jobs. I'm like, well, that's awful. With all the knowledge we have available, that's not good. I would love to work with that. And I went and discovered the company called Good&Co that's built quantitative culture graph. Harassed CEO until he hired me, and I think we built pretty impactful products there where we could actually measure cultures of companies so that once, say, you have few offers, you can go check yourself around and see where you fit best culturally. Because culture, we all agree, like it's an important aspect, but nobody can define it. Nobody can put a finger on it. Nobody can check, like, what is it? It's very amorphous thing. That
very
important,
loose.
it's very loose. But you know what it is? Well, we were failing to find it. Spending time in Good&Co, I realized, like, well, while this is an important prism to it, I think the culture aspect is very, very important. I think it's wrong sequencing in terms of how to find yourselves the next career. And again, American careers, what we do is so important, especially in Silicon Valley, especially in tech. It's such a part of our identity, our life. Functionally, I think that's where you should start. And once you have 7 different options, and yes, and you are ambivalent between them, then check culture where you fit best with a team, with a hiring manager, whatever, to see which as an additional guiding point to what you should choose. But you should start with function to identify. I mean, an example I give is like, well, David, you're entrepreneurial companies. Imagine you work in a company where you fit with your best buddies, you fit culturally, feel values, but you do manual data entry all day. There's no entrepreneurship. Like, you gotta hate your life, even though you love everybody you work with, right? Because like this goes to currency. So it's like, well, functionally, we need to solve it to people. And that's how, and again, serendipitously, I met my co-founder, Andrew, and he has incredible background in terms of building machine learning, data, like public data, but like unique, accurate data products that when, we spoke, we had the same vision, same values of what we're trying to build, the vision we had, and how we're trying to approach it. Like, well, let's really take our time and build Celential to solve it one day.
How'd you meet your co-founder?
So it was very serendipity. When I was working at the previous company, Good&Co, I helped them do due diligence. We got acquired by a big German enterprise called Stepstone, and they asked me to do due diligence on a couple of other companies because my expertise in the product and the HR space. And they also asked me, okay, if you see any other deals, like any other interesting companies, like please, could you introduce us potentially to us? Maybe we could be partnered with them, invest in something. So once in a while, and because I also love meeting people, now I have an excuse to go to try to network and talk to people because I truly have a lot of potentially help with them. So I would go on AngelList, every couple of weeks just to see what's happening, in the recruitment space. And I just saw this new thing popped up called Celential, and Andrew just left looks like his job at Lattice Engines to start a Celential. And look at his background, and I'm like, oh, there are very few people in recruitment space who have such a deep technical expertise. And he also clearly has been an engineering leader for many, many years, so he actually understands the aspects of recruitment deeply as well. So I'm like, well, let me go meet him. So when we met, we quickly figured out that, hey, we do have very, very similar philosophies in terms of what we're trying to build. I think the career space should change. That as opposed to saying like, well, let me introduce you to my parent company. Like, look, let's join forces. Let's build something together.
What are some of these philosophies and values that you had in common?
I think the biggest one is that it's important to understand is like to drive a two-way fit in terms of matching. Because a lot of consumer kind of recruitment services are based in terms of serving the consumers first because, well, there's a lever. But that's done in a way that really fits the best with the hiring company versus, or at the same time, a lot of recruitment, anything enterprise recruitment and HR products really serving their customers, the enterprises. Are they actually centered around the experiences, the values to the candidates? Well, not really. Right? I think that if we figure out how to do the two-way matching street, no matter who's paying us, no matter what's the interaction, if we still maintain the two-way matching requirement in anything, I think this is where we're going to find the optimal solution to this, careers problem. And it's truly a huge problem. When was the last time you had a friend who said, I went recruiter look for jobs and had a great experience, right? It's a soul sucking, it's a terrible, it's a ton of work experience. At the same time, when was the last time you met a recruiter who was loving his life and recruitment and everything else? Like, it's also difficult for them, right? It's not a great process. I think really ensuring that it's a two-way matching street. I think that's what we're trying to do. And two is what we talk about. Like, we want to do two things. One is we want to help people accelerate their potential because there's so much of career services today, or how people approach their planning is so much efficiency is lost in it, or so much noise introduced that you are really missing out on a lot of opportunities that you just never discover because everything else is covering it up. right? Like you really have to be searching for needles in a haystack, and helping people uncover those needles in a haystack, right? Removing all the noise, we believe will help people accelerate their potential. Like whatever their capabilities trajectory, it can always, be maximized as a full if there are no this, subjective and efficient barriers are not in the way.
So something you mentioned earlier is you made fun of LinkedIn for how it's like kind of somewhat, or it is primitive for companies can use to like find the appropriate candidates. And it's funny that we make fun of it. I make fun of it internally too. And the funny thing is LinkedIn is still a major step up from what existed prior. Literally like a bunch of people submitting their PDFs, sometimes even like printed forms to an employer to look for a job. Like, dang, that definitely didn't scale. LinkedIn is like at least a 10x improvement from there. And I'd like to believe there's at least a 100x improvement available on top of LinkedIn. What do you think still remains in the world of combining technology and recruitment?
Well, so the funny thing is, actually, you mentioned LinkedIn. Like, it is a huge step up. I think LinkedIn solved a lot of problems that we had. LinkedIn and a lot of single players actually also introduced a lot of new problems that they kind of shifted. Right? It's funny you mentioned, right? Before LinkedIn or the job boards, right? Print out your resume, go door to door to companies, and the HR department's like, please call me if you have anything, right? Because that was go door to door, classifieds, maybe billboard. That's how you lose for a job. The problem was like, well, there is no good distribution of information, right? Now all the job boards, the dices, the monsters, now the Indeeds, the LinkedIn's. Now all the information available online, and now you don't know what's right, what's wrong, what's good, and I think really the next step up from LinkedIn is remove all that noise and personalize. Like, look, there's a world of this, million potential jobs available that you might come as a search if we do a search, but let me remove the ones completely irrelevant, and the ones left, let me stack rank them from the best to worst given for you specifically, which has to do is with what you're interested in, what's available, and also what you can qualify, right? For example, I think a big part that's missing that we actually try and solve in the slide is that people have different expertise, proficiencies, capabilities, right? And just because on paper and keywords you meet this job doesn't mean you can actually pass the bar.
Right.
So, but then, because there's no such understanding, showing you a lot of opportunity that look on paper correct, but actually might be too hard for you, is in a way doing disservice. Like, I'm not the one to remove anybody's aspirations in any way. Like, you can always find them, but if it's truly potentially, beyond capabilities, then worst thing could happen is that they would want to speak to you, because then you're going to waste so much time talking to them and thereby missing out on something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one part is that we try to identify like where is something we can maximize something for them. I mean, can everybody go work for for the toughest, top was finest, really hard to recruit startups in Silicon Valley? Well, no, right? I mean, a lot of people in Google right now, they wouldn't have qualified when Google was in an early stage startup. I mean, everybody knows they had an insane hiring bar, right? It's just that's a reality of the landscape market. So I think factoring that for candidates to really identify the best opportunities for them that can really relevant, help with the best career move as they can get. I think that's what's really missing in the recruitment space. That it is the next level that we're enabling.
So you touched on it lightly, but I want to know if you can go deeper on like the fact that everyone who's ever been an employer knows that they'll get a giant stack of PDFs or some forms or go through some application tracking system, and you have to just like read through these, spend like a few seconds on a piece and figure out like, does this pass the check? Does this not pass the check? And I imagine like it starts creating this like silly game where people start stuffing keywords and like languages that they know, or like experience in or like metrics that may not have. Like, it's hard for people to stuff so many like keywords, metrics, and whatnot onto their resume just to make sure they don't get passed by the automatic filters that check for certain things. Like, how do you think the appropriate way to do it in the future is?
Yep, absolutely. And the funny thing is, some of the resumes I've seen that have a lot of keywords, like tiny font and white, so that and completely irrelevant. It's purely make sure that no matter what it is, you try to come out because it's on it, right? But when you're a human reads it, it's not there. And to be honest, to those people, I say like, well done. You figure out a system, and you get that's on the level of intelligence. I had a person like this. I'm like, I don't think anything you fit. I will speak to her. I will help you because clearly there is something to you. I think the way to approach it is, well, the way I try to like to think about like what as opposed to like, what is the next step is, well, what is this world that we want to be like in the next 10 years, right? I'll kind of walk backwards. And what I want to take in years is, for example, say, here's what would be my dream to build. Like, that if I can make it happen in the next 10 years, I'll die a happy man. Somebody say named John sitting in a big company. He once said, JC said like, okay, I've been learning a lot. I've been doing well in my work. I've been taking classes, upgrading my skills. I'm ready to take on the next challenge. He comes on Celential site. He presses the button and immediately start popping up calendar invites for him for first round interviews with hiring manager at different companies. He didn't have to specify location, work, skills, role, anything else. And it's already first round interview. Wouldn't that be a wonderful world?
I love the way you're thinking. I love imagining the ideal and working backwards to see how we can make it a reality.
So this is what I think we're moving towards. That we will happen. Whether it's going to be Celential or somebody else, this is what we're going to get to. And I want to play my part in making it happen. So if that's what we're moving towards, then well, what is needed to get there? And I think what's really missing is that from all the different tools, the career service available right now, if you see more deeply, they are process management tools, from ATSs to even knowledge bases, right? They're different classes, but what's missing from them? An understanding about the person who is in the process, who gets tested, who goes through an ITS, who gets something.
Yeah.
It's the person's part is missing. Because none of it is personalized and tailored to you. Because while we think about, I need to hire engineers, I can hire marketers, I could hire field technicians, and a specific role and letter, pigeonhole, and put a bill. Like everybody's individual, everybody's path, how they came to this. So it needs to be personalized for it to be able to happen. What we're describing in 10 years. So the important thing is to try to start creating is understanding about the person and tracking it. So tracking people through their careers, what they are, what they're doing, so that whenever they interact with anything that has to do with career aspects, from like, hey, I'm trying to learn some new skills for my next journey, or better yet, before I learn new skills, let me figure out what could be the next steps for me. Like in 5 years, what do I want to get to? The industry, the role, the function, location, whatever people may have preference. What are different paths available and what do I need to learn? Let me learn it. And therefore, when I go through careers, interviews, how can we tune to that as well? So really understanding about the person that's really missing. And that's partially like what I'm happy about building here at Celential is we are building, we call this the talent graph, is we are graphing the people and try to deeply understand to them so that one day we can act as a personalized career coach. Right? Career coach, I think, is great if it's a good one. Right? But majority of us cannot afford career coach, let alone a good one. And one of the great things about career coaches, it's not the unique knowledge, because with the internet, everything you want to have access is available online. What career coaches play a role these days, especially graduates, they understand you and they tell you what you need specifically. It's tailored to who you are specifically, not to this representative on average group like you. No, you specifically, you, David, right? What's missing? This is what's I think the core of Power Technology is what we want to enable. Whether it be, again, extension of the service we build or somebody else built on top of our API, like understanding of you as a person is that anything that's being put together is tailored to you. And I think that's really the next evolution in career recruitment services that, the vision that I'm hoping to get to is going to get enabled by.
And do you imagine that users themselves are going to go onto the platform and input like their experiences and what they want? Or is it more like going to be inferred based on some other data source? I'm trying to put it together in my mind. Like, how do we reach the point of personalization at scale unless there's a lot of individual level data? Yeah.
Oh, great question. And I think it needs to be both.
Okay.
Right now, we are, fully built on available public data. And even then, right, if you approach in a smart way, we're able to make very accurate recruitment service and build our data basis that. But really, in a conjunction with both, I think what I'm describing can be mostly enabled. Because certain data I cannot get from you. I can infer about your preferences, but I can know for sure what you told me. Especially, some granularity, if you specify or have a way to test it, is going to get enabled. Certain elements we can infer, we can learn from. And if we're just limiting to one or another, I think we're either missing it. Also, if we're limiting to one, I think also the most path people take in the recruitment services is based on as information is provided. But nobody wants to provide a few information until you're big, right? Like people give it to LinkedIn because of value. Until then, like why would I spend time on it? But until you spend time, it's like chicken egg problem.
Right.
So certain information, let's remove the need from a user if it's available somewhere else from having to input to use. Really, like let me learn, tell things to you based on everything you do, right? I mean, you make this podcast show. There are videos, right? We potentially can analyze to get to know deeper understanding. Do you want it to retype or upload transcripts or videos to the site just so we can have this knowledge? I'm like, well, that would suck. Nobody's gonna do it, right? And we're not gonna achieve the required impact. But if I can identify it somewhere else in conjunction with something provide, this is what I think how we can aggregate enough data to be able to truly personalize it to each individual person.
So flipping the tables around in terms of like the employer perspective, if an employer is trying to look to work with you as a recruiting service, how do you know which engineers are like the top for their priority list based on what already exists as public information? Like I imagine there's a lot of engineers out there that don't have much on the internet.
That's true. They do, especially if you rely on just one single source, right? If you are able to rely on multiple ones, right? Then you can, aggregate more. And actually, one of the challenges, especially when you rely on public data, is starting point. Like, how do I know that, David, say on YouTube, and David on Stack Overflow, and David on Twitter is the same David, right? And it's not an easy challenge to do it well accurately because you can either be very, very strict in algorithms, in which case you don't have very poor data set, or you can be very lax and then you have very, dirty data, which is, again, right, it's just wrong. So I think part of what we're building out is like, because, and I wish I could take credit for it, but it's actually, it's one of the areas that like Andrew has built up a lot of products like this to be able to build a product that perform really well based on such a big constraints available that I think other companies are able to solve. And it's not a trivial thing, especially when it's it's a startup, right? Can Google do it? Yeah, absolutely can with their resources and money, but for a startup it's hard, right? And it's important to be able to have an expertise understanding to solve that. But you can also, you can make even when you do have available information, you can make inferences in terms of what you have. And of course, it's going to differ based on how much information available, but you can also infer. What you shouldn't do is go to people with completely wrong proposition. Because that's, I mean, especially if you spoke to your engineer friends, I know you have a lot of them. How often does a complaint recruiter say, like, they offered me this role, I have never done it, like, how is this relevant, right? And you cannot fully blame recruiters for it because, well, they're not engineers that wouldn't know it. Like, even if you provide all information, how do they know, right? It's not easy, especially if very little. I think if you cover at least understand the basic requirements, like what is their role, right? Is there back and front of an engineer? Right? Our focus right now on software engineers and sales, right? Because we want to tune the algorithms to be accurate enough for vertical. I think that's the only way to really take it to the next level. So we start focusing on these two verticals. We start with engineering. So for us, like, well, let's just figure out if you back and front stack or full stack, so that if you are, a networking engineer who works with C and C++, I don't come to you and say, would you like to be a mobile engineer working Objective-C? Not the same. So I think as long as you solve that, then when you provide, that basic current passes, you may not always be accurate, but people are actually open to listening. People are able to reevaluate their understandings. And after, we approach the engineer for different customers several times, now we actually can start zeroing in of roughly preferences I may have, right? Because I picked it for a big company, middle, small, or early stage. Let's see what response, type of industry, right? And that becomes an additional data point that you can factor in to identify what people want. But if I'm thinking like, well, what is really the steady state of a product? Is actually what you mentioned, like, one day we do need to enable to learn feedback from people themselves directly, because even if what I learned about your past, it does not fully define what your preferences are now going forward.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe somebody interested in crypto. If I really based on the past, before crypto was big, I could never guess somebody's interested in crypto because, right, I'm only looking based on your past historical data. So at some point, you tell me, like, if you have something new that's not reflected, tell me no, right? If you're interested now in drones, like, and you've never worked in there, I would not be able to guess, but you can tell me. But as long as if you tell me you're in drones, I can actually identify what is drones and if hyper relevant and to your interests. Like that's, I think, that where we're beginning to approach, where always understanding what to produce that's relevant to each individual job seeker.
So we've talked about a lot of high-level details as it relates to recruiting. Since you're the head of product, how do you think about product for your company? Like in terms of roadmap for this quarter to next quarter, what is some of the high priorities that you have in your mind in terms of like what can be achieved within, call it 3 to 6 months time?
Thank you. The way I guess we approach defining priorities, like one thing that we do have a long-term roadmap vision, right? That's 10 year, what's view to 10 year. Actually, that's part of our vision. Like this is what we're gonna get. Like, so what are different intermediate steps we can get into it? And always trying to walk backwards to understand like what is the next order we must enable, and our philosophy is like each individual quarter, especially being in an enterprise space and having customers, some really big impactful customers. I got to do everything I can to deliver for them and make them happy, right? And that might be something out of left field. I got to enable it. But so there's always going to be requests coming in. But no matter what, we also make sure that each quarter we deliver something big, right? And the way we discussed, like as we scale and hire our team, we can increase how many big things we deliver per quarter. We're still in a small team, so for now it's still one, but I want to be like, I want to do now 2 big things, like 3 big things. And that when I get to, but at least no matter what, this is one thing we're focusing on, so that it is needed to be able to always ask the question, like, should we be building this? Does that help either this number one big thing we're moving towards, or does it really help to make sure we kill it for our customers? And if it's not one of those, so we're not sure, or we are, we can't even, put a stake in the ground in terms of what we think is going to impact to do it, push it back, right?
Okay.
Then, let's delay it. It sounds like it could be a big priority. So that's how we approach in terms of prioritizing what we're, building.
Do you have a public roadmap you're willing to share for about the next 1 to 2 quarters?
Not fully, but what I can tell you is we are trying to make our customer more and more efficient in that. The way we currently work is we actually don't have a customer-facing product. We provide a recruitment service, and we do everything ourselves based on our product.
I see.
And the reason we chose this path actually was part of the pivot. We initially started building a SaaS tool, and what we quickly realized, well, first of all, it doesn't solve the core problem, because if somebody has a hard time hiring, their solution not as a tool, the solution is more body through the door. The tool is a hope that it will improve you, help you, make you more efficient, that you can have more people coming through the door, but it's not necessarily the core solution. Like, well, what if we go back to the core solution, right? Actually give you people who want to speak to you. But 2 is what we realized that to make something really accurate, given the diverse nature of each individual people's background, and when we try to do a match that's a two-way street and personal to each person, each company, it's hard. It requires a lot of iteration learning. And if we are just providing a tool, not staying firsthand and not viewing the recruitment, the quality, we're not going to be able to improve as fast. So actually, because that's how we're going to be able to train the core that we have to be accurate enough to produce results. So what I can share about our roadmap with right now, what we help companies if you need to recruit, how do you identify people who are matching, relevant, interesting to you that come in, and then, which is, I'd say, arguably even harder, how do you get them to talk to you? Because even if they're a match, and the people who are, honestly, even not just good people, there's all engineers right now really being spammed left and right because of insane demand. How do you convince them to talk to you versus to 10, 20, 30, 50 other companies talking to? Like my engineers at Celential, because I'm looking at their LinkedIn to understand what does the landscape look like. No joke, they get pinged between 50 to 100 times by different companies a week. Please speak to me. So how do you break that? How do you convince them? And if we do that, well, we help you do this, but there are other sources of candidates, right? Well, people apply. You mentioned hey, you can become part of. You apply and you try to tune and hack your resume in a way that you get set up the filter so it doesn't stay in a black box. So yes, that's true.
Right.
It is a black box. Well, what if we actually help companies to say, of 100 people who are applied, who are the 3 people you actually should speak with, who are very, very relevant to this role, and better yet, who are 3 people that are relevant, they're not really good fit for this role, but they're fit for another role. So talk to them. Maybe they're open to it. And chances are they're open to it, because I think another problem with career space that job descriptions are awful, right? The the application rankings, they're black box of, or like black hole of where the resumes go to die. But partially a lot of job descriptions are which in a way that candidates don't know if they're applying for the right one. Frequently, interesting enough, my wife works at Google, and she refers people to Google. And what she constantly advises them and showed me is that a lot of jobs at Google are written in a way that it looks like it's a mid-level position at most companies, and it might be extremely senior at Google, like what would be kind of director level.
Right.
But a person applying, they wouldn't be able to tell it, neither by title description or anything else. So of course they apply, they get rejected, and what's going on, or if they apply, of course never even get a response.
And never hear back. Yeah.
Which is really the worst case. So it sucks for applicants. It sucks for companies because, well, so many people apply. You have to spend a lot of time reviewing everybody who applied if you don't want to be one of those companies who just never responds, or you don't, and then you actually meet really good people applying, right? And if you then go pay external recruiter to hire this engineers, then, well, it's like $50,000 to $50,000 mistake per person, right? Which is it's a lot of money starting adding up. So that's type of things we begin to think like, what is this like talent graph, the core that's powering our recruitment service? Where else can we enable it to help better customers in other areas of recruitment?
Where do you feel like society at large, and maybe even the tech industry at large, has underappreciated the use of AI in recruiting?
I think there's a misunderstanding in terms of how to evaluate the impact of AI, in terms of what people are expecting out of AI and what it should do. Here's what I mean is, on one hand, yes, there could be problems with biases, right? And now diversity aspects were beginning to be more of a hot topic to discussion, actually make an effort. But doesn't mean you need diversity that's an issue there? Well, not necessarily. Right? There could be a lot of instances where application where that's not really an input data in the first place, or you may not be able to draw such inferences to impact any decision making in a wrong way or a moral way. So I think that's there's universal fear even when there shouldn't be. Two is when in terms of like how strong or effective it is, and people expect for AI to be accepted. I think it needs to be 2-3 times better than say human equivalent. Otherwise, it's deemed not worthy. Well, objectively, that's not really the way to approach it. If AI can do it 10% better and it costs you way less, that's already improvement. It's worth using it. It doesn't mean it's not good. They're like, no, it's like, what is the best you can? If you're trying to break AI, it's not about who does the job. It's like, what is the best you can achieve? And whether it, if you look at the value efficiency, whatever the metric trying to optimize relative to costs, that's what we're trying to get to. Whether it's AI, human really shouldn't be a factor, but it's not how people think. And I think that's potentially stifling adoption, more broader tool that can do a lot of goods because of such misperception. But on the other hand, maybe it is whipping people like me to make sure I do produce something like 2, 3, 5 times better, so that we can now make sweeping changes one day to enable it. So it's hard. I don't know. In this regard, I want to say this. While I think it's not an objective way to approach it, I don't necessarily think it's fully bad.
So when I took AI courses back at Berkeley, one of the common warnings they would give us is that there's like some undesirable side effects of AI. For example, it's very common that in a lot of more like linear regression-based like AI, that you're just going to replicate what's already existed in the past, and that leads to certain biases against more like diverse candidates. And I noticed on your website, one of the use cases was using a platform that would help encourage diversity. Can you elaborate more about that?
Oh, absolutely. So here's an issue: is I think when it comes to diversity, one thing that people haven't fully, I think there's no consensus. There's things there's still debate, or other people are maybe also trying to shy away from this conversation because of repercussions, and people don't know how to talk about it. But when we talk about helping diversity candidates, are we talking about equity or quality? Are we trying to help those who are disadvantaged, or are we trying to ensure that your racial, gender, or other parameters are not used against you, are not biased against you? And on one hand, say like, well, if certain system says like, look, we provide you results irrespective of what the any say racial or gender parameters, so that are not surfaces, that the decision making is not based on that. Well, is that good enough, right? Some people say yes, some people no. The second, well, it also means if you're really based on say your career performances, then well, yeah, we might have even not knowing the full gender, racial parameters underneath it, we might infer them based on, there's these disadvantaged categories. So if you have to buy the for strong people, well, allow them an already diverse, it's not a diverse group, right? It's just, that's why we have a diversity issue. But what we're able to do is actually truly solve diversity that, well, to be able to have more diversity within your companies, well, you need to go to a diverse candidate and say, please talk to me. But how can you target them? So that's what our system enables. It can tell, like, look, if you really want to try diversity, like, it's great that you should absolutely produce enough set processes within your recruitment process so that you're not discriminating, you're not biasing against diverse candidates. 100% you should do it. But you're still not going to have enough of them applying to be able to serve your company's diversity. So that's why you need to do proactive outreach to diverse groups and say, please talk to us. And there are very few solutions out there, and there are even less that are actually effective to do that. We're one of them. We can actually help you say, hey, do you want to practically target only diverse engineers to get on the radar as a company for them to potentially come to apply to you? And that's what we enable companies, that the companies who truly want to change the diversity, not just prove that they are not biasing at diversity, but actually try to attract diverse talent. They are able to do it through our service.
And when you consider recruiting for your own company, when you're looking for engineers, when you're looking for salespeople for Celential, like, what are some of the things you value as a company leader? Like, what are some of the traits you look for when you hire?
So traits that we try to over-index at Celential is humbleness and directness and autonomy. Right? Of course, with in terms of humbleness, like, one thing that allow the culture we're building at Celential is that it's a very chill group of people who are just trying to build something. And it would be surprised to anybody, but a lot of companies, especially Silicon Valley, are very dramatic. There's a lot of drama, right? Even someone makes it to TechCrunch. I mean, that's it's bad when it's now TechCrunch discussing the drama happening within a company. And in a way, it's understandable because so much tech is driven by young people who are smart and driven, passionate, but also they're young and inexperienced, juvenile, and it will happen. And it's great. Unfortunately, sometimes I experience those environments. That's why when we're building Celential, we are completely different. Right? There's we have no drama, and like, it's amazing. It's really focused on people who are positive and cooperative, who want to really help solve this careers issue thing. And
that's my favorite type of environment.
Yeah, it's true. I think some people prefer drama. Actually, I know it. Even though they don't, like, that's where they thrive. Now me, like, to me, that's a distraction. I just want to have a smart, fun colleagues that we can say, how do we solve this? And that's what we focus on. We also really value directors because in our early days, we had a development office in China. Now it's fully expanded. We have some operations there. So we've been, Silicon Valley and China. Now, of course, US team is fully distributed. We're going to continue that. Communication is hard. It's exactly describe what you want is difficult, especially if you layer different cultural backgrounds. And of course, have us US team being from all over the place, and now having a team in China, so that we want to have people who are, as mentioned, like really humble, nice, but also direct, that we can have those conversations. We can sometimes say what would be perceived as harsh in most environments and have it not aspire to anything else because we know there's no undertone, there's no agenda behind. It's really set from the point of view of helping you improve, helping the team improve, and make sure that there is no miscommunication. That's from how we approach building product to how we communicate, discuss each other, everything. And I think directness without the right personality, I think, lead to a lot of unpleasant places. Work environments, again, would not be a place that majority of people can work comfortably to produce the best that they can produce. But I think the humbleness with the directness, that's a required combination to be able to create what we have created here. And also hard degree of autonomy is that startups are hard. There's so many moving pieces, so many little things to build through. Is to ensure that everything operates really well, you cannot yet be everything top-down, defined, prescribed, thought through.
Yeah.
Everybody should have like a mind of autonomy to be able to build something, to own something, to review, to contribute things through at every knob, every dial. And I think that's really the required mindset for startups. Like as a startup, am I good at writing specs? No, I'm decent, but I'm not the best. But even then, I think writing a spec that defines everything. It's hard. I'm not sure it's fully possible, but two, it would take so much time. It's probably not a worthwhile opportunity if you have people who can own different areas, who can think through, can understand the end value they're bringing, and that's kind of one of the third things that we try to screen for when we bring people on board.
How long was it into the development of Celential before you were able to use a tool to hire people for your own company?
It was fairly early, and oh my god, it was awful. Oh god, yeah, very bad, very bad.
Tell me about it.
Anything, from misidentifying the right people, the right roles, like approaching people for the wrong role, and of course, either we tried permutating different things in an early day from like, hey, now based on these parameters, show me who's relevant, and I'm like, oh my god, none of these I want relevant, and a lot of them are not even what I set up in my setup, because how we build our models to identify people, I just played wrong. All right? Mm-hmm. From simple, like, are they back or front strategy? Like, I want somebody with a startup experience. Oh, wait. He works at a company we misidentified in startup. He never worked in startups for once in his life, right? But then I'm pulling this list of people. So every way you can think of, it broke. That was, that's actually when that was one of the realization to us that we're actually providing the service, right? Be it how we approach for ourselves, for our customer, that hey, the technology plus human in the loop allows me constantly learn what I'm building and improve, because if I'm not getting enough of that feedback back. But two is, if I have human in the loop, if the system fails, I can also interfere and to ensure that the customers, no matter what, getting results and experience. And if they're paying me money, I better do everything I can to make sure they get the value out of it, right? And I think really the combination of both, that's what we're trying to achieve. And I think it's in many areas I find AI could be applied more if people didn't go the route of like, we got to build algorithms and automate it, right? And ultimately, they're not producing anything because they die away. And I think if they really approach it with human in the loop approach, they can actually probably provide better value result and give themselves time to improve their algorithms over time, so they have less human in the loop, and now to full automation. So that's early days was like people wanted like, yes, it's awful, but we can make it work if we change how we approach it, and we have human involved. And now, and that's, I think, was fantastic. Fantastic learning, fantastic turning point for us as a company, and I'm happy we persisted. Didn't think like, oh my god, we suck. We should turn off the light. This is awful.
How much longer from that point did you feel like did it take to improve the features, clean up some data before you felt like this is good? I'm impressed with this. I'm ready to offer this to others.
We started offering to others actually pretty early. Pretty early, and partially because we wanted truly more real, tangible data to learn,
right?
And that's what we need to do. And introducing humans, right? We can, deal with a lot more mistakes in the middle. But I think it took us about a year and a half to actually switch to our new model, which will kind of has really taken off, which would allow us to raise a Series A, is we used to work as recruiters, right? Only getting paid 20%, when somebody gets hired. So we're approaching everybody as Celential, which thereby we could eat up a lot of mistakes that we're making. At least it's still in our name, and we're not, making our customers look bad. Which is again, like we gotta ensure that we do everything to deliver fantastic service to our customers, including like, hey, we don't pay for mistakes. So it was about a year and a half of us doing it, turning and improving it till we could turn it on now. And now we actually charge subscription service to our customers, how we approach, how we structure our service to, really change dramatically. But it was a lot of work, a lot of iteration, a lot of improvements. And actually several engineers actually kind of, again, partially, I think, hiring the right people, retrained, stepped up to work on recruitment, become effective recruiters for a period of time to be able to better understand what does the landscape look like, what does the problem space look like, to be able to then improve the product.
So I think I'm more familiar with the world of engineering, and it makes total sense that you can build AI to help identify engineers and to match them up with like appropriate companies. How about on the sales side of things? Like, how do you know how can you use AI and I guess public internet data and private data to figure out if someone's actually a good salesperson and if they're a good salesperson for a certain niche?
Very, very good question. I think that's where it's a type of matching problem actually that can only be solved with AI. Because humans just do not have capacity or time to factor in all the information that you can to be making the decision making. Well, for salespeople, for example, one of the first things we can step into to at least identifying who may have relevant experience is like, well, let's first look at companies who have similar products. From identical companies to roughly the similar space. Like if you're tech sales with tech sales, if you're hardware selling hardware sales, and if you're insurance sales, something. If you're tech sales, well, tech's very wide, but are you serving, $100 a month per seat subscriptions or $1 million a month? Like what kind of products are they? They'll begin to segment. And as a human reviewing somebody's background and the companies they worked in, can you know all the companies? Probably not, right? It's hard to identify. Especially like, well, you might know some top companies, but can you know all of them? Well, no, right? Because it all changes, differs. Can you keep track of all the information to identify? Of course not, right? Computers can. So we can start applying it there. Like at least like what is different clusters of the types of experiences that you can see that somebody might have something relevant. The second one is like, well, let's start identifying people based on performance. Well, if somebody's, went from, say, account executives to senior account executives at Salesforce in, say, 3 years, 5 months, is this good or bad? Well, but if you know all of them, you can see if the top 10% or 20 or it's the bottom 10%. And you can, again, is that by itself a silver bullet? No, but it's additional data point. You can, well, what about relative to all the account executives or big companies? Right? So tracking a lot of this information across the whole sector, you start identifying a lot of signals. And what's exciting to me, but also frustrating, there's no silver bullet. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. You have to factor in hundreds, thousands of little parameters that are small in their own magnitude, but if you do enough of them accurately, an overall picture begins to come out that you can start making decisions based on. So that's how in sales they start approaching. Or you can also start picking up signals like, well, maybe this company has 50 salespeople, and you know what? There's top performance, low performance, right? Nobody can be best salespeople. It's all going to differ. And plus, even when if everybody did one quarter, well, next quarter the company is going to change with targets, so they're always going to be, some outperformance, some underperformance. Right? That's how the world of business works. Well, there could be an interesting. Well, this company has 50 salespeople, and 20 of them wrote on their LinkedIn proudly they did higher than their quota, and the rest 30 didn't mention a thing. Does it mean they didn't perform? Well, maybe not, but it's a data point, right, with something else. So this is where I think tracking information and noticing it and inferring based on different elements, that's where AI can start making accuracy, because we're humans just not capable of doing that. We just don't have enough time.
And the last question I'd like to ask you, what's something you've learned in the past, call it 6 to 12 months, that you wish you knew ahead of, like earlier in your career?
I think it's not so much just 6 to 12 months. It's just a lesson I am constantly reinforcing in terms of how I'm building my team to how I think I constantly try to remind myself that like you need to try to always figure out how to bring value and what is the best value you can bring and optimize for that and how to do anything else. Right? I think it goes back what I think was missing earlier in my career. So is I was looking for managers to be my mentors to tell me what is the most important thing and how to optimize around it. To be honest, I think it's rare when people actually meet good mentors. Good mentors are hard, partially because being a mentor is hard, and so like not a lot of people can do it, and I think few people would want to have capacity to do it. So, and unless you can be really good at it, then I think trying to throw advice here, they might actually be doing disservice to a person because you might be misinforming them. I think if you're constantly trying to answer that for yourself, whether you have mentors, manage anything, is you're not dependent upon outside factors as much to achieve, be it a career or your own company. Really figure out what is the one core value I can bring. And I think it matters whether you're an IC or a manager. It doesn't matter. Like, what are the core values that I'm bringing? And if you're doing that great, of course, does that necessarily make your career fully? There are a lot of other external parameters, but without this core, I think progressing, succeeding is hard. When you have that to you, then anything else addition you can learn from big companies, right? Like career making, managing app, all the stuff people talk about, is like becomes a lot easier if you're actually doing great because you know what your factors you're focusing on. So that's what I'm constantly reinforcing, reminding myself that like, hey, right now, what's the best thing to do? Maybe I can guide the product now. Next moment, like, well, maybe the best value is like not me focusing on product, but trying to figure out to train the team or hire somebody, right? And especially early founder, this is more critical things like you need to go hire. So right now, maybe like I need to, in certain times, we figure we get to reach to the point like, well, we need to focus on now hiring again. Right? It's like drop everything. I need to bring a great marketing person on board. Right? Recruitment takes time. We know ourselves. Our product doesn't do marketing as well yet. Let me take it on.
Okay. Well, I've been very thankful for this past hour. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. I also gained a lot of insights. I just want to leave you with an opportunity for our guests and our anyone who's watching this show, if they want to follow you along their journey, what's the best way for them to do so?
LinkedIn. Yeah, always. I mean, my philosophy working with startups was, if there's anything I can do to help, I will help you. Right? If I have time or capabilities, I'm always happy to. Startups hard, careers are hard. So I think if we can contribute to each other in any small way, we should do it, and I'm very happy to. So I'm all open. Send me a connection on LinkedIn, tell me what it's about, and anything I can be helpful with, I always will.
Sounds good. And we'll make sure to have that link on the landing page. Thanks again for your time, Ilias.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate it.